In this watercolor tutorial, I'll show you how to use simple supplies like paint and paper to make beautiful Christmas tree ornaments. Hello my friends, what's up? Welcome back. My name is Shayda, and on this channel we make art together and it's fun, not scary. I seriously have the best audience on YouTube. You are so kind and supportive. This is a wonderful artistic community and I feel like we're very in tune. If you're here, you probably love painting and maybe, just maybe, you love the holiday season like I do. This year I'm seeing a ton of hand-painted ornaments on social media. I actually did a video about hand-painted ornaments last year, so check that out. It's a really good video. But this year, I wanted to do something different. I wondered to myself, could we do some sort of ornament that is also watercolor? Could we bring watercolor and ornaments together? And I think the answer is yes. The only things you need are some really thick watercolor paper, like 300 pound, and some beautiful brass grommets. I'll explain all the supplies once we start the project, but this is a fun one. And if you love watercolor painting and Christmas, I think you're really gonna enjoy this. Did you know that I release an extra video every month on Patreon? Patreon is a great way for you to support this channel and get a ton of extra bonus content every single weekend. And this month we're doing brush pen Christmas cards. There are 3 designs and I'll walk you through each of them step by step. Check it out Saturday, November 6th on my Patreon. Let's talk about the supplies you'll need. So I am using watercolor paints. This is my 48 pan set from Mungyo. Don't get hung up on having the exact same stuff as me. Any paints will do. I have a number 4 round brush and I've linked my supplies in the description. You're gonna want 2 glasses of clean water, paper towel for blotting your brush, and then I am using 300 pound watercolor paper. 300 pound or 640 grams per square meter is really thick, heavy paper that will not buckle or warp, making it perfect for making a really sturdy, nice and flat Christmas ornament. So you can see how thick that paper is. It is incredibly dense and heavy. Then you're also going to need some scrap paper or a little sketchbook for mapping out your design. You'll also need tracing paper, a pencil, an eraser, and a fine liner or Sharpie. Now we're going to begin our design with a guide. So draw a couple circles or ovals. That shows you where you're going to place the flowers and how large they're going to be. And then you can start filling in. I'm doing these really simple, 5-petal flowers. So if you need help with illustrations, I have tons of videos. But just in general, this is how I'm approaching the design. Begin with a guide, couple circles to show you where the flowers are going to sit and how large they are. And then we make our flowers, draw our flowers, and then we'll add a couple leaves. Some can be large, some can be small, maybe a few berries. And I kind of just keep going from there. I decided to do one more flower and I placed some more leaves. The leaves are always kind of tucked in between and behind all the flowers. I even added a few smaller flowers on the right there. And then that's my initial sketch done. Now we're going to refine our sketch. So I am using my fine liner. Remember, supplies are linked in the description, and I am going to go over my sketch, and this allows me to really start to think about the shape of each flower and the more subtle design elements. So do these leaves have a little bit of a toothy edge? We can add those sort of details at this point. Remember, this allows you to not really put that pressure on yourself to get everything right off the bat. You've got so many chances to work on this design, and I hope that makes you feel confident, because once you're done those first 2 sketches, first one's in pencil, then in pen, then we put down a sheet of tracing paper and we go over it again. And I love tracing my work because this really allows me to refine my image. I'm able to keep what I like about the drawing, change what I don't like. If you're thinking, oh, that one flower could be a little larger, now's your chance to do that. And then once we have our trace, we've got this really refined image that we're super happy with, hopefully. And that's what we're going to transfer onto our watercolor paper. So you're putting a lot of love and effort into these decorations, and I think you're not going to have to worry about messing up on your really good quality 300-pound paper, right? So I put a bunch of graphite on the back of the tracing paper. Then I lay that down on my 300-pound watercolor paper, and then using a nice sharp pencil, I go over the entire illustration and it transfers it really beautifully. But of course that is pencil, so you could still erase that if you did make a mistake. Now at this point, we are ready to mix up our paints. So the pressure is off. We have a beautiful sketch transferred to the watercolor paper, and now we can really enjoy the watercolor painting process. I want to do a really muted color palette for my ornament. What else is new? So I started by mixing a little pink. I'm using red mixed with a little bit of brown and a whole lot of white. So you're going to wet your brush and just use that wet, clean brush to scrub at each cake of paint. Here you can see me scrubbing at the peach and bringing that over. And I am mixing kind of these muted peachy pinks. So lots of white in there, lots of water, maybe a little hint of brown if it feels too bright. I'm also going to mix up kind of a white color. So to do that, I bring over lots of white using my wet brush, and then I grab just a tiny little, just a itty bitty bit of brown, and I mix that in, giving me this really, really beautiful creamy beige that will show up on the white paper. For my brown, I've got a little bit of Van Dyke brown mixed with violet, so that gives me a nice rich dark brown. I'm also using a little bit of cobalt blue, and to mute that, I'll use French gray. I'm using yellow ochre here, and what else? I've also mixed a little yellow ochre into my pinks to kind of make it more peachy, so you see me just kind of playing around. Let's start painting, and we'll talk more about colors later. I'm going to make the center flower the creamy beige. That'll allow me to put peachy pink flowers on both sides of it. And I must say, I really love painting with watercolor onto a transferred image, and I hope you will find the same. It just takes off all of the pressure. It's almost like you've created your own coloring book page, and then you just get to think about, creating a pretty color palette and letting your paints mix and blend on the paper in a really beautiful way. Here you can see I've used the yellow ochre to do the center of this kind of rose-like flower. Then I'm grabbing a little peach and then a little bit of pink, and we're kind of going outwards on this flower, leaving a little bit of negative space there. And all of those colors, the ochre, the peach, and the pink, they're all blending really beautifully. And I didn't have to think that much about the shape of the flower. I'm just able to concentrate on my painting and my brush work. So if you are confident or at all confident with your drawing skills, this is a great way to approach watercolor, because I know when you're buying expensive paper, it can be very stressful. Like, I don't want to mess up on my good quality paper. As I work here, I am doing a little bit of wet into wet, but I'm also doing wet on dry. So you can see the center of that rose dried, and then I went back with a darker yellowy brown and just added some more detail. I'm adding some dark sort of stippling and little dots and lines to the center of the other two flowers to make them just look more like a real flower. Adding that stamen at the center really makes your flowers come to life. With my 3 flowers painted, I'm going to start on some of the leaves, and I'm using that mix of cobalt blue and French gray to paint some of these medium-sized leaves. I know I remind you of this all the time, but leaves do not need to be green, and especially because these are hopefully going to be hung on a Christmas tree, so we want to make sure that we're not using too much green so that they're colorful and they look beautiful hanging on the tree. I also am using a mix of violet and brown, but this has more violet than brown to do these little kind of berries or leaves. I'm not really sure what they are. And then I'm using a little bit of brown just on the tip of that brush and kind of running the brown through those little berries, and that gives sort of a pretty look. I have some larger leaves over here. Again, I'm using the mix of violet and brown. I kind of just mix it at different ratios, whether it's a little more brown or a little more violet, just depends on the ratio, but I really like the way that looks. And I'm also using a mix of the yellow ochre and brown to add even more definition to some of the stamens. Keep in mind that wet on dry painting is your friend. Building up contrast, definition, and depth is so easy when you wait for the paint to dry and then go back in with darker color. I often see the comment, "My painting looks flat." Keep in mind that when you wait for things to dry, you can be wonderfully precise. But you also want to work a little bit of wet into wet, and that's what you're going to see me do on these leaves. While my green is still wet, I go in with an even darker, more concentrated green. This color is olive brown. It is a green, but that's what it's called. And so what you see me doing here is working a little bit of wet into wet, but actually that bottom leaf, that front leaf, is a little more wet on dry. It had already dried. So here you can see the two techniques in action. Even though we've transferred a design to our watercolor paper, doesn't mean that we don't get to use all the wonderful watercolor techniques that we usually employ. So have fun, play around with your wet into wet and your wet on dry, and you're gonna paint a beautiful tree ornament. You might have noticed I am wearing a t-shirt with my own design on it. Friends, I finally have merch. If you're watching this on YouTube, check the merch shelf below the video. If not, check the description for a link to my shop or just head over to my website. All right, with that one almost done, let's set it aside. We're going to do one more example together, so hopefully you feel like you can either paint along with mine or create your own. Remember, start with a guide. You're going to draw some circles of different sizes, and those will be the flowers at the center of the design. Here I've done one large flower and two medium-sized flowers, and then I am just kind of deciding they're all going to be these large 5-petal flowers. From there, I add a few leaves, maybe some smaller flowers, and then when our sketch is done, we go over everything in pen. So use a fine liner to refine your sketch. Now that we've got the larger details decided, we're able to concentrate on some of those smaller details. After that, we refine our sketch even further with a trace. This allows you to keep what you love about your drawing and change what you don't like so much. After the trace is done, you're going to grab a pencil and cover the back of the trace with graphite. This allows you to transfer your design onto your good copy paper. In this case, the watercolor paper that is super heavy, 340 pound. Use a sharp pencil to go over the entire design once, and then your design is transferred. From there, you can mix up your paint colors and start painting. And this is where it gets fun because your design is already transferred, so there's no pressure. You can think about your brushwork, you can play around with wet into wet, you can build up contrast and color and depth and all of those good things using a wet on dry technique, remembering that leaves do not have to be green. And yeah, I think that's it. I think you get it. Have fun with this one. Okay, with two of my paintings complete, what I want to do next is simply go over them with a little bit of a sketchy black line. This is a really nice marker for doing those sort of lines because it almost looks like you've done it with a paintbrush and ink. It is a beautiful brush pen. You can shop this on Jet Pens, I believe. I will add some links to the description. If I can find it on Amazon, I will. It's an amazing tool. It almost looks like a comic book drawing, like those really traditional brush pen illustrations. I love this pen. And that's exactly what I'm doing, just adding some beautiful detail to the illustration, whether it's an outline or just a single line down the center of a leaf, a little bit of a line on some of the flower petals to really make them pop. Just add as much as you think your illustration needs. All right, and with that complete, we are at the fun part. We're going to add a beautiful brass grommet to these. Here's what you need. A cutting mat is always good to have. And then I got a little grommet set from Amazon. In Canada, this costs 15 bucks. I'll link it in the description. It has grommets of all different colors, which is really nice. And it comes with the setting tool. So you've got a hole punch. That's the first thing. Then this is the two-piece tool that you need to set the grommet once you've punched the hole in the paper. So it's a great little set. It's easy to use, and once I finished it, it added such a nice effect that I was like, I'm gonna put grommets in everything. So definitely pick this up. And finally, you'll need a hammer. Okay, let's put a grommet in our painting. So you're going to punch the hole. So just decide where you want that hole to sit, put it on the cutting mat, little tap tap with the hammer, and your hole is punched. Now we set the grommet, and the grommet is two pieces, a larger piece and a smaller piece. You'll need your setting tool, of course. What you're going to do is take the base of the setting tool and place the larger piece of the grommet inside it. It sits in there really nicely, so just put that in there. They're kind of finicky, but you get it. Then you're gonna take your image, your painting, your paper, and you're going to place that face down onto the grommet, onto the setting tool. You can see what I'm doing there. So it sits in there nicely. Then we take the smaller part of the grommet, place that on top, and you're ready to set it. So this, you can see me do it twice. I put the end of the setting tool on top, and then again, just a couple tap taps with the hammer, and that is set. Flip it back over and you'll see you've got yourself a beautiful grommet. It's so simple to do, and it just looks so polished and finished, and it adds something I think really nice and special to a paper ornament, which I could see how a paper ornament might be a little bit unsubstantial, whatever the word is. So now we just need to cut these babies out, and they're gonna look so pretty. I just used really nice sharp scissors and cut around the images. I didn't get in there in the nooks and crannies. I actually think that the little bit of a white border looks really pretty. And they're really gonna pop when they're on the Christmas tree. So all that's left to do now is add a nice length of ribbon to our ornaments. A bit of ripped linen makes a really pretty ribbon, or grab something at the craft store or on Amazon. Something substantial like velvet or silk, really just like the grommet, helps to make these more substantial and more beautiful. And yeah, that's it. They're all done. I love the way these turned out, and I hope you'll give them a try as well. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Remember, if you love these videos, you can support this channel by simply subscribing. It makes a huge difference to us. So go ahead and smash that subscribe button, and I will see you soon with a new tutorial.